Be More Chill helps to tell a story that is uniquely personal to all of us, but it wraps it up in a package that makes it fun to watch. Welcome to Off Book. In each episode this season, we'll be taking a look at a different musical and breaking down the music and story of the show to try to figure out what makes it so popular. Today, I'll be breaking down Be More Chill, a relatively new musical, but one that's gained a lot of traction online, which has become pretty common in recent times, but is still hard to do. It's based on a book of the same name that was published in 2004, and the stage adaptation first opened in 2015 at the Two River Theater in New Jersey. In 2018, a modified version of the show opened off-Broadway at the Irene Diamond stage, and the entire cast of that production followed the show to Broadway later that year, where it would play 177 performances. A London production opened in February of 2020, but had to close early due to COVID. The Be More Chill production team also announced a production in Chicago that has been indefinitely put on hold, also due to COVID. Additionally, it's been confirmed that there will be a movie adaptation of the show at some point in the future. The show doesn't have a huge fan base, but the people that like it really like it. So how did a show that didn't do super well critically to begin with end up on Broadway and beyond? Let's find out. I think part of what makes Be More Chill so successful is the story. For those of you who don't know, the story of Be More Chill is basically, it's about this high schooler named Jeremy who isn't very popular until he buys a SQUIP, a super quantum unit Intel processor that goes into his brain and kind of tells him what he needs to do to be popular. And so the musical is the story of kind of the journey he goes on with this and trying to get what he wants, and he's questioning if he really wants what he thinks he wants, and his relationships with his friends and his teachers and his parents. And I think what's interesting about this story is that it's a pretty common high school type story, except there's a supercomputer constantly talking into his brain, which on the one hand elevates it a bunch. It adds so many new layers, but I think that at the same time it doesn't change any, because I think that voice is in everybody's head. It's just a different kind of voice. It isn't a supercomputer, it's just us. And so what you end up with in Be More Chill is a story that on its face is all about this modern techno computer dude, and it's all futuristic, and it's very well written. The character of the script is quirky, he's intelligent, he seems like he's there just to help Jeremy, but as the show progresses, you start to understand more about his character and see, what is his end goal. But I think beyond that, you get this story of just humanity. And I know that I say it a bunch. I think I've said it in every single episode this season, but the best theater is just all about humanity. And this show does that. It's about the story of one guy who just wants to be liked. And he gets this view into everybody else's lives, and he starts to see that nobody is perfect, that even the people that are popular aren't satisfied. And it's a lesson that every single piece of high school media teaches. But it's one that we still can't shake. I don't even think that graduating high school helps, because no matter how old you are or who you are, you still feel at times like you're not satisfied with where you are. And I got deep for a second. And I think this show speaks into that, because Jeremy has the ability to see into everybody's head. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows what's in everybody's head, and he recognizes once and for all, this isn't the high life. This isn't everything he ever wanted. And it kind of leads him down this journey that a lot of us go through. Like, what do we want in life? Who are we? Who do we want to associate with? Where do we want to be in life? And I think Be More Chill helps to tell a story that is uniquely personal to all of us, but it wraps it up in a package that makes it fun to watch. Because, you don't want a story that is just high school, because that's boring. We've all been to high school, or we will be to high school. It's not that entertaining. There are some stories you could probably tell, but there are very few stories that are just pulled from high school that would be interesting for a Broadway musical. But what this does is it takes a story that's pretty average, and it elevates it. And it elevates it in a way that makes it way more entertaining to watch, and way more of an interesting concept than just a high school story. I mean, saying, hey, do you want to go watch a Broadway musical about high school? Versus saying, hey, do you want to watch a Broadway musical about a supercomputer in a high schooler's brain? One of those is significantly more interesting than the other. And so I think that it's one of those things where you go in for the hype. You go in for all of the techno computer aspects, and you get that. it definitely does deliver on the element of the supercomputer. It's a pivotal part of the story. They pulled it off very, very well. And I think that if you're going to see some computer stuff, you're going to see some computer stuff. It feels very techno. But also, while you're watching that, you start to get this other story that feels a lot more relatable, feels a lot more unplugged, because yeah, okay. But you start to see this picture of this high schooler's journey. I think that's very well conceived and very well executed. I think that it's hard to get that balance between the flashy stuff and the real heart and soul of it, but they managed to strike a pretty good balance. And something that I noticed as I was listening to the cast album was that in the move, I don't know what they did between the original New Jersey production and the off-Broadway production, since it was not an off-Broadway cast album. But I do know that between the New Jersey production and the Broadway production, they managed to add a lot of character depth to the secondary characters. In the original cast recording, Jeremy has a lot of character development, and that's about it. Some of the other characters have some development, and you start to see them a little bit, but really, they're all just there in service of the character of Jeremy. Whereas in the Broadway production, it's Jeremy is still the focus, and you still don't learn a ton about the other characters, but there are a lot of moments that will teach you a little bit about them. And so that change to highlight all of the characters in their own little way helps to really make you understand, from Jeremy's perspective, what he's seeing, what he's understanding, so you're kind of there along with him. Because you meet these characters and you think, oh no, these characters look happy and they're very mean to everybody and they just are living the high life. And then you realize, along with Jeremy, no, they're actually not. They're actually going through the same stuff that he is, just on the inside. But also, I think that it helps to make us relate to them more, because to an extent at least, the more characters you have, the more likely it is that somebody in your audience is going to relate to one of them. Assuming that all your characters are different. If you have 80 clones, then it's not more likely than if you have one clone. But I don't know even know how you'd write a musical about clones. Anyway, where was I? Right, characters. So I think by giving some of the more secondary characters kind of mini arc of their own, where it's not a full story, you're not learning a bunch about them, and it is still to some extent in service of the A story with Jeremy, but you start to see some more of that humanity and some more of those layers. It makes the entire show seem much more fleshed out and well-rounded and so much fuller. I think that you have this greater understanding of these people, and so the story seems to mean more to you, not just when Jeremy does something, but whenever anything happens, because it's pretty likely that you feel like you relate to whatever character is currently making a decision in some way. And so none of these characters seem flat or two-dimensional, or like they're just making a decision because they had to for the plot. It all makes sense because they've created characters that are going to make these decisions. All of these decisions make sense based on the characters' personalities. And it definitely does seem a little bit like they went back and created personalities for these characters to justify the decisions they made, because we don't find out about these deeper layers until later in the show. And also, it wasn't there in the original cast, but all the decisions were, and the plot stays mostly intact in the move, even though the characters have more depth. So maybe the depth was there all along, and the writers knew about it, they just didn't add it to the show until later. But it does seem a little bit like, hey, let's go add some more depth to these characters so the plot makes more sense. And say what you will about that kind of reverse writing, but I think it does work. I haven't seen the show live, but I would have to imagine that you wouldn't notice it when you were watching. You wouldn't go, hey, that seems awfully helpful. You just gotta be in the moment and experiencing it. And the writing is good. It doesn't scream, hey, I'm a retcon. It feels like it's there, but also if you look at it, it feels a little bit like this might have been something they added later just to add more depth to make it more relatable. But in any case, it worked. I think that you start to feel for these characters more, and so you have more of a stake in what happens, not just to Jeremy at the end, but to all of these characters. You want to see how all their stories resolve, and if they get what they want. And there aren't any villains in this show necessarily, because you know that all of these characters want something and they're just trying to get it. Any one of these characters could be the star of their own Broadway musical, And that was true in the first version in New Jersey, but I think that adding some more of that depth through the songs and through some of the dialogue scenes helps to illustrate them more and helps to remind you of it. So that way you're more engaged in the theater because you are constantly thinking about, hey, what are these other characters going to do? Which I think makes it less of a one-man show and more of an ensemble piece, and I think that those are really great because that's what life is. Life is an ensemble piece, even if it seems like it's a one-man show. Wow, I'm getting very deep today. Overall, I think that, the story is a story about trying to find your place in the world, but it's told through the lens of getting a supercomputer in your brain, and that's awesome, and it helps the show to feel more enticing and more entertaining, and it is more entertaining than if it was just a story about, hey, some people are confused about who they're supposed to be. I think that you go in expecting a fun time and a good time and to be wowed, and you do, and you also end up getting some more important life lessons, and you start to see these journeys that these characters are taking, these very deep characterizations with amazing performances. There are some cast members that were even pulled from the original New Jersey production that have just done an amazing job, and the new cast members did a great job too, making all these characters, no matter how much depth or stage time they're given, feel like real people that are living real lives, and to make the audience want to feel more connected, to learn more about them. And I think that really makes the show feel well-rounded and complete. Today's episode is sponsored by Jerry's Entertainment Nook to activate circular ubiquitous lengthy advanced realities. In Be More Chill, Jeremy is assisted in his quest to be more chill by the Super Quantum Unit Intel Processor, or SQUIP. And here in real life, we have our own fancy acronym for folks that are trying to power on their confusing, long, and rounded fancy universes. In today's partner, Jerry's Entertainment Nook to activate circular ubiquitous lengthy advanced realities, or Gentacular? What does it even mean? Oh, it's a word that means breakfast things. Interesting. Anyway, whatever that means. In music-related topics, the music of Be More Chill is fascinating because it's a style that you don't often get on Broadway. It's this kind of electronic type music. For example, listen to the opening bars of the show. That's a sound you don't get very often on Broadway. And it's very interesting because the sound of the show has evolved over the production. It definitely had some of that sound in the original New Jersey production, but over the course of the off-Broadway and then Broadway production, the band and probably the music director put in a lot of work to make it feel very original and very unique because it has a lot of instruments that you don't get on Broadway. It has some very techno-sounding instruments, which is good. And they also have a lot of sampled sounds, a phone dialing in the background. You can hear some distortion in a lot of the characters' voices. They have a lot of harmonies that sound very weird to give it that kind of modern techno clashing type sound. Did that make any sense? I don't think it did. Just listen to the music and I think you'll understand what I mean. But it has a sound that is kind of uniquely its own and fits the show perfectly because it is able at times to be this big modern electronic sound that fits the script very aptly. But there are also times when it can be a small, intimate, emotional type show, and it does that in a way that still fits inside the musical style. It doesn't need to lose its electronic style for Michael in the Bathroom. I'm a creeper in a bathroom, 'cause my buddy kinda left me alone. But it still manages to be a rich and emotional song. But at other times, it can be just huge and a bunch of instruments and a really unique sound that you don't often get on Broadway. Not to mention that the vocals in this show are just very, very good. I'm just going to play some random cool vocal moments from the show and hope you'll appreciate them. It's from Japan! How do you do that? Speaking of impressive things, the score stayed mostly the same in the move from New Jersey to Broadway, but there were several changes, including the addition of a new act on the finale called Loser, Geek, Whatever. And I really like this song. Like, a lot. Like, generally I prefer the original cast recording to the Broadway cast recording, not by much, but just, I don't know. I think it sounds a little bit more genuine, but this song does such a good job painting the character of Jeremy and letting us into what he's feeling, because, you know, it's from his perspective and we can see a lot of what he's going through, but this completely raw moment where we can start to understand fully why he made this decision, because it's not entirely clear. We know he's not popular, he wants to be, the script can make him, so he buys the script, and then the story continues from there. But in this song, we start to really understand his inner monologue, the thoughts that he has, and his characterization, which help to catapult us into Act 2 so the story can kind of come to its new heights and we can start to really dig deep into these characters, because now we understand the main one. And, you know, I think that in a show all about what's inside his head, the computer, understanding the emotions and thoughts inside of his head is super important to try to lend so much more depth into his character, because we need to empathize with him. If you don't empathize with the main character, it's not going to work. But because of this song, I feel like we can really understand why he does what he does and what he's feeling, what he's hoping for. So we want him to win, even though we don't entirely believe that this is the right way to go about it.
I already know what it's like to be the loser. I should find out what it's like to not be the loser, or the geek, or the whatever. It's not only school that's rough, being lonely's stupid tough. And I've earned the right to selfishly be all for one and one for me. I'm not the loser, the geek, or whatever, ever.
It's such a well-written song. Another one of my favorites is there's a song called Upgrade, and the song was in the original cast recording as well, but they added a section for the move to Broadway that sounds, it reminds me a little bit of Will I from Rent. For context, that's this song. And then there's this section in Upgrade.
Tired of being the person that everyone thinks that I am. Tired of
So, not the same, but it does have a very similar feel, and I don't know if that's on purpose. I'm just not realizing that. I guess it could have been on purpose. I don't know if the writers of this show listened to Rent. Anyway, I think that just like in Will I think that this little interlude helps to provide some of that depth that I was talking about in the characters. You start to really understand how much these characters are hurting and how really nobody feels satisfied. And I think that that's, like I was saying earlier, that's so important to the plot, and doing it in that way where everybody's singing the exact same line. There is some more character-specific stuff earlier in the song, but this kind of full company style number where it all feels... For the first time, I think they're all on the same page. They're all on the same page, and that they're all hurting. And I think that that is such a good use of music to make the unison singing and the beautiful, beautiful harmonies reflect the kind of unison that they're all in emotionally, if that makes any sense. By adding this interlude into a pretty upbeat song. For context, this is what the beginning of it sounded like.
Never hung with a girl like you before. I don't know if you know it, but I am sure that for me you are an upgrade. Upgrade, let's be each other's upgrade. Oh wow. Upgrade.
I think that it helps to kind of remind you that even though this is a fun, techno-heavy, electronic Broadway musical, it is still a show about, well, you guessed it, humanity. And it helps to inform the rest of the show, because all of these characters want to be seen and heard and understood and loved and cared for. And I think that that desire is what's going to lead us in the rest of the plot. It's going to help the characters make the rest of the choices that they make. And I don't want to spoil the ending of the show, but it's going to lead us directly, really, to the ending. And by understanding that they're feeling this way, when we do, we start to understand the choices that they're making later in the show. And I think that that's so important to understand character motivation and just characterization in general before you start getting into those important decisions. Because I think if you make a decision and then explain why you made the decision as a character, it feels a little bit like, okay, that needed to happen in order to justify this. But if you understand the character and you understand what they're feeling before they make a decision, then when they do make that decision, even if you don't like the decision, even if you're mad at them for choosing to do that, it still feels so much more realistic, and you have a harder time being just mad at them because you do understand where they're coming from. And that is such a powerful tool, and I think they use it in such a good way. But also, what they did is they decided to let you know this before the big climax of the show, but after a whole bunch of exposition and very important plot decisions and very important character decisions. You already have these preconceived notions about these characters, and now you're hearing directly from them, hey, there's more to me. Now I'm gonna go make some more important decisions. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds here, where you're able throughout the course of the show, based on the actions that the characters take, to get the same idea of these characters in your head that Jeremy has of them in his head, and that the script is constantly kind of reinforcing. So you're just as much of a character in this as Jeremy is, when right along with him, you're learning, hey, these people have more depth to them, which, like I mentioned, is so important and very well done. So that way, when you continue, you have that knowledge of who they are, but you also know that that's not what you thought about them before this song. You had just as many preconceived notions about them as he did, and you only knew them for like an hour. And I think that is such a realistic portrait of humanity, and it does such a great job to really put you directly into the story, because now you're feeling for these characters, but you're also feeling for Jeremy, and you're confused as to where you're going with all this as these characters continue to live their lives in ways that intertwine and also often conflict, and it makes it feel so much bigger and so much more full, because now, after you already come up with how you feel about them, you start to understand them, and it's great. Not to mention that the music in general, it's just really good. I would highly encourage you to go listen to this cast album, and then to go see the show live whenever theaters reopen and Be More Chill has a new production, because it really is just a beautiful show. You know, I think Be More Chill succeeds because it knows who its audience is, and it crafts a story that is custom tailored to that audience. And it doesn't worry about the people that don't like it. It knows that it's mostly catering to high schoolers, or people that are younger. And it's okay with that. It's going to tell a story that will resonate with those people. And if other audiences don't like it, then fine. They're not going to worry about trying to fit in all these characters to make everybody happy. They're just going to tell the story they want to tell. Over the years of development, the creative team managed to build a sound that was uniquely their own, and the cast created layered and complex performances to instantly hook audiences in. With its fast-paced energy, the show might not exactly be chill, but it's pretty cool. Next week's episode is all about another new musical, Dear Evan Hansen. Until then, have a great rest of your week. You got this. Sincerely, me.